In 1923's The Ten Commandments, the Israelites walk through the parted Red Sea. It's actually two separate shots combined into one. According to sources at the time, the first shot was just the actors, and the second was actually gelatin. This compositing technique was a precursor to the blue and green screen technology that has taken over the industry.
There's almost nothing that is completely unrelated to a previous effect.
Back before the widespread use of CGI, effects artists and filmmakers did everything from painting on top of shots to projecting moving backgrounds to make the impossible happen. Here are 7 tricks used in old Hollywood that still exist in some form today. CG allows filmmakers to place people and objects anywhere they want in a scene. But it wasn't used in a movie until 1973's Westworld. So how did filmmakers in the early 1900s do this? With arguably the first ever special effect, the substitution splice. A filmmaker would start filming a scene. Then they'd stop the camera and start shooting again from the same position with a new person or object added to the frame. This effect made it seem like something or someone appeared out of thin air. Director Georges Méliès used a substitution splice in many of his on-screen illusions, such as this one in 1896's The Vanishing Lady. The trick was also used to pull off dangerous stunts. Take a look at 1895's The Execution of Mary, Queen of Scots. To make the monarch's beheading look real, the actor first knelt at the chopping block, then the director stopped filming, and a dummy was placed where the actor was. When they resumed filming, the executioner chopped off the dummy's head. By today's standards, this early form of editing is pretty noticeable. Stunt coordinators these days improve this concept with camera lock-offs. Take this moment when The Rock's character gets hit in the face by a motorcycle in 2016's Central Intelligence. To keep the actor safe, they filmed the shot from the exact same angle twice. First, they captured a motorcyclist doing a backflip, then The Rock's stunt double being pulled back. With today's visual effects technology, the two takes could be seamlessly combined. One of the earliest challenges of animation was natural movement, so animators turned to rotoscoping, first thought up by Max and Dave Fleischer. Artists would project live-action film footage onto their easel and sketch over the images frame by frame so they could mimic real-life movements. For example, in the 1932 cartoon Minnie the Moocher, the Fleischer brothers gave the characters eye-popping dance moves by rotoscoping Cab Calloway. Nowadays, rotoscoping software allows for this process to be used on something much longer than a short cartoon, like the TV series Undone. And motion capture tech is a natural extension of the Fleischer's work, with fully realized mocap characters like Thanos in Infinity War. 1933's The Invisible Man needed to shoot its invisible lead wearing clothes so the audience could see him. How do you create a floating shirt without today's technology? Instead of a green screen, they used a technique called compositing. In Méliès' time, this could be done through double exposure, but James Whale instead used a compositing method known as the Williams process. First, actor Claude Rains was filmed in black velvet against a black backdrop. This created a negative, allowing every part of the actor to disappear, except for the parts not covered in black. They then filmed the background separately. These mats were then printed, masking off the foreground and background until the two images were combined. Creating the right composite images often involved thinking outside the box, like that scene from the Ten Commandments we described earlier. Because the compositing was done by hand, it was an imperfect process.
If you watch old movies in which you can see the edges around the figures where they've been composited in, that means that the optical printer operator was short on time. Oftentimes it's just cheap effects because they didn't want to spend money to do it.
Modern compositing is much smoother. The black screen used in 1933's Invisible Man has been replaced with today's blue and green screens, and elements are filmed on motion control cameras for a more seamless composite, like in 2020's The Invisible Man. They first shot one take of Elizabeth Moss being attacked by a stand-in, and then a second clean take without them. Things get a bit more complicated when it comes to fantasy backgrounds, like in The Wizard of Oz. The filmmakers couldn't just composite in real footage for the Land of Oz, and building all the sets from scratch would have been a difficult task. So instead, they used matte paintings to paint around the characters. For this effect, a matte blocking everything except the actors was placed in front of the camera. The artists later painted the surroundings on a separate glass mat before the two images were combined. So, for example, when Dorothy walks down the yellow brick road in this shot, it was actually just the actors on a set with no backdrop. The sky, flowers, and mountains were all painted in after the fact to make it look like they were headed towards the Emerald City. But it's still hard to overcome the flatness of a painting. Look at this shot of Orson Welles speaking in front of a large crowd in Citizen Kane. The painted extras appear completely lifeless. Present-day digital mats and set extensions offer a fix to that. By duplicating tiles of real extras and adding digital doubles into the mix, Ted Lasso could create a fully formed stadium filled with 26,000 fans who could react directly to the action shot in camera. Without today's animation software, it can be difficult to add realistic three-dimensional depth to hand-drawn scenes. So in the 1930s and 40s, many animated Disney classics used an invention called a multiplane camera. The camera was attached to several layers of glass, each displaying a different layer of artwork. Each layer could be moved at different speeds and distances from each other. Because the two-dimensional drawings were separated in real three-dimensional space, they created a parallax effect. This camera helped add depth to the forest in Bambi, and it's how filmmakers made the evil queen surrounding spin around her in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. These days, the multiplane camera effect is recreated digitally. The various layers can be designed and easily separated on a computer to create the illusion of depth. And filmmakers are getting more creative with how they integrate 3D assets and trick the eye. 2020's Wolfwalkers created a 3D forest as a guide to place hand-drawn characters into dynamic environments. Even before CG, filmmakers tried to fix the static nature of painted mats and 2D backgrounds. One solution was rear projection, which created dynamic, moving backgrounds in real time. An actor would stand in front of a screen, and behind that screen, a projector would play footage shot elsewhere. Like this shot from 1938's Bringing Up Baby. In reality, the two stars and this leopard were nowhere near each other. Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn were actually driving in a fake car on a set, while the leopard was shot separately and projected behind them on a screen. Or this plane crash from 1940's Foreign Correspondent. Director Alfred Hitchcock projected real footage of the sky and ocean through the cockpit's windows. But rear projection had its own issues. Because it was projected from the back, the lighting and image looked a lot less realistic. Plus, it was difficult to match the lighting of the real world in the studio. That's why the background roads in these driving scenes from To Catch a Thief and Dr. No look so flat today. Rear projection also became harder to utilize as more and more films were shot in color.
Colors are often just a little off, and they're just off enough that, especially today, because with digital composites, you can correct that stuff pretty easily, but you couldn't at the time.
Still, rear projection lives on through boundary-pushing technologies used by directors like Stanley Kubrick and Jon Favreau. In 2001: A Space Odyssey, Kubrick instead placed the projector in front of the screen, with the light bouncing off a mirror. This created a stunning deep focus and perspective during the Dawn of Man sequence. You won't see that in a rear projection or any matte painting. And LED screens have turned projection from a cheesy effect to awe-inspiring. For example, The Mandalorian chose to swap projections and green screens with LED screens. You can immediately see how naturally the light reflects off the Mandalorian and Baby Yoda in this shot. And because the camera actually moves in sync with the background, this shot has a natural parallax effect, just like those multiplane cameras from decades earlier. Before monsters and other creatures could be created with CG and motion capture, filmmakers primarily used stop-motion animation. But stop-motion requires expensive miniature models and sets, which often look unnatural when interacting with the cast. You can see that from looking at King Kong, as the claymation Kong can't truly interact with Fay Wray. So pioneering stop-motion animator Ray Harryhausen thought of Dynamation. His method combined a range of visual effects techniques, from mats to projection. To understand how it works, let's look at this fight scene between human characters and a skeleton army in 1963's Jason and the Argonauts. The actors rehearsed their moves with stunt people who stood in for the skeleton army. But the scene was actually shot without the stunt performers, and only with the actors playing the human characters. Harryhausen then used stop motion for the skeleton army. To match the movements perfectly, the footage of the actors shadowboxing was projected behind the animation table while Harryhausen moved the skeletons frame by frame. A camera filmed the skeleton army through a glass mat, masking off the shadowboxing actors. Finally, the shadowboxing scene and the skeleton scenes were printed and composited together. This 5-minute sequence took 4.5 months to complete. But Dynimation's influence can still be seen in the blue and green suit performers standing in for characters that will be created with CG. In 2019's Dumbo, a green suit performer helped the cast with their sight lines when interacting with the baby elephant. And motion capture allows an actor to play a CG dog on set, so nobody is guessing where they have to look. Looking back at Dynimation's individual elements, each effect can seem time-consuming and outdated on its own. But it shows how every technological advancement in cinema wouldn't exist without the low-tech experiments of the industry's past.